We are all living in a society that is made up of bullshit. We are drowning in a complete sea of bullshit. That's what it comes down to. That's what it boils down to. And because of this, the whole fabric of the whole social system, the whole cultural system is based on bullshit. And because of that, anytime anybody gets to the point where they reach their limits and they say, I'm not going to take it anymore, I'm going to open my mouth and say right out loud, call a spade, and say that this is just bullshit, all utter complete bullshit, then what this bullshit society has to do in response is to ostracize that person, to castigate and categorize them as being some kind of a crazy, eccentric, delusional person, and thus we have labels such as a conspiracy theorist. Anytime somebody stands up and says, you know what, it's all bullshit, the whole fabric of this society is bullshit, and we shouldn't have to take it, we should be fed up with, I'm fed up with it, I'm not going to take it anymore, then what this society does in response to that is comes up with ways of labeling that person as a kook, as a conspiracy, and one of the main current labels is conspiracy theorist. So when a person recognizes inconsistencies, physical, scientific, material inconsistencies, like a person being hit with a bullet from behind the head, having the head react by being thrust backwards towards the supposed, the alleged source of that bullet, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make physical sense. And so the person that has the nerve to stand up and say, you know what, this simply doesn't make sense, has to be labeled as a conspiracy theorist and a conspiracy nut in order to ostracize them and stigmatize them in the minds of the general public, who are supposed to go on mindlessly swallowing the bullshit so that the process can continue unimpeded. That's all it boils down to. That's exactly entirely what the whole fucking game boils down to from beginning to end. And it's all goddamn fucking bullshit. And a conspiracy is simply the notion that powerful people might get together and have a plan to make sure that they remain in power. That is how outlandish is it to imagine that people whose lives are all devoted entirely to the whole concept of gaining power and keeping power might actually work together to ensure the success of that goal. That's all it is. That's the whole conspiracy thing wrapped up in a nutshell by George Carlin very succinctly, and probably the most brilliant thing that somewhat annoying, sarcastic man ever said. The notion that powerful people might get together and have a plan. A plan, Carlin implied, to hold on to and maintain and increase their base of power. That's all. That they might have a mutually supportive and mutually beneficial amongst themselves scheme to make sure that things work out according to the way they want things to work out. They want things to work out so thoroughly, so desperately, that their whole lives are single-mindedly devoted to that goal of acquiring power and holding on to power and constantly increasing power in every case as much as possible. Anybody who dares to stand up and say it's bullshit and I'm sick to death of it and I cannot tolerate it anymore has to be labeled and stigmatized and castigated and ostracized as a heretic, a blasphemer, a traitor, a communist, a liberal, a communist, a hippie, a tree hugger, a truther. The worst name of all, a truther, because that incorporates and is based around the word truth in the same way that a pearl incorporates and is based around a grain of sand. And that's what the truth is. It is merely a grain of sand. All it takes is the tiniest grain of sand to initiate the formation of a notion that we call truth. It's a reaction to that tiny, tiny, tiny grain of sand. Are you mad as hell and not going to take it anymore? Are you fed up? Don't you think that that's the sentiment that got people to stand up on Lexington Common one early April morning in 1775 and risk their lives? A number of them giving their lives because of the fact that they were simply mad as hell. We researched, my brother looked up, when we went to the cemetery last Saturday, the first cemetery in Woburn, where they have a commemorative bicentennial stone to commemorate the grave of Asahel Porter, who died on April 19th, 1775 in Lexington. Probably the original stone had fallen out into just tiny bits because they placed a brand new one in 1975 on bicentennial, and probably the original stone had fallen to complete disrepair and crumbled even. Those slate stones are not very sturdy. Half of them are broken and crumbling. And my brother looked up Asahel Porter and the story of how he died. Asahel Porter didn't die standing on Lexington Common as one of the Minutemen, holding his muskets and waiting till they see the whites of their eyes or whatever else the legend of that day is. Asahel Porter was simply a farmer who had gone into market on the day before with two other guys to go to the farmer's market in Boston to sell eggs. He was an egg farmer on his way back from Boston to come home to Woburn when they were stopped by the British soldiers, the military police, who apparently were clued in that there was some activity going on among the rebels, among the Minutemen, and they were out to stop any so-called suspicious activity. They were out looking for people that they were going to label suspicion of terrorism. It's no different. The British suspicion of rebels in 1775 is no different than the American suspicion of terrorism in 2012 or any time since 2001. Suspicion of terrorism is enough to detain somebody and essentially deprive them of all rights. And they detained Asahel Porter and his two farmer colleagues that had gone to the market in Boston to sell their eggs and had come back late from that marketing trip. And they stopped the three of them and detained them, and two of them were okay, but then they were starting to, when they were finally released and allowed to, oh, their horses were confiscated, so they couldn't ride back to Woburn. So they were told to get off the horses and just start walking. So they started walking. At that point, Asahel Porter panicked. These soldiers were standing around them pointing guns at them, and Asahel Porter, this egg salesman, this farmer, panicked, and he started to run. And at that point, one of the soldiers aimed his gun at least one of them aimed a gun at Asahel Porter and shot him, and that's how he died. And the bicentennial gravestone in the first cemetery of New Woburn has this patriotic tone about Asahel Porter. Actually, had a good quote. It said, although he was a man of peace, he was dragged into a fight not of his choosing. And he was one of the first victims to die for his new country. Well, Asahel Porter was in no way whatsoever attempting to die for his new country, of which he never knew or even could have projected or imagined that he was dying for a new country. He probably thought of himself as an Englishman. Maybe not. Maybe he thought of himself as an American, but it wasn't a separate, independent America. It was an America that was very much a part of the English Commonwealth. And he was gunned down as a suspected terrorist by military policemen. That's how it comes down to. He wasn't saying, I'm going to die for my brand new country. I want to wave this red, white, and blue flag, which won't even be designed for years after my death. He had no clue whatsoever. All he knew was he was running from military policemen who were going to do anything who had no mercy on him. And all they had to do was accuse him of being a suspected terrorist, and that gave them the ability to deprive him of all civil rights. That's all it comes down to. But we have to, on the bicentennial, we have to honor him as a military martyr of some sort, to try to justify in retrospect the whole militaristic thing of the revolution being a glorious revolution, a glorious militaristic achievement. When all he was a simple guy trying to earn a decent living, going to the fucking farmer's market. And it's all bullshit.